Hello, my name is Jihad Yagoubi, and my research is about the interconnections between land and identity, how they materialize in the discourse about collective lands in Morocco, and how does that impact marginalized communities in the country. So how did I get to this question, or what sparked my interest in this is that at some point I realized that in the media, or I start with a bit of context. So collective lands in Morocco, part of which we have Soulali lands, are an indigenous type of land management that was in the country and like still exists in the country before European colonizations of the 19th and 20th century. And during the past years, or since 1919, more exactly, there were land tenure reforms that accelerated and increased the privatization of these lands. The latest reform that happened was in 2019, which was called in the media the Melkization process. And that means privatization process. So it's a very increased acceleration of privatization. How was this process addressed in media discourse is that the Soulaliyet women's movement was portrayed very positive during the past few years, and it headlined most mainstream conversations about feminist achievements in the country. But when conversations about land tenure reforms, when it was about the laws, then we only saw, even in the pictures, we talked about men in office, and the conversation about women kind of disappeared from that discourse. So considering that control over discourse, and particularly media discourse, yields power, I thought about, there were puzzling questions that came up from this observation. First of all, the question was, who are the Soulaliyet women? And is it a women's movement? Is it a feminist movement? And who constitute this movement that is particularly portrayed in the media? Why are they contesting misogyny within their own communities? Because their claims were about getting compensation resulting from land privatization equally to the men in their communities. So why was the focus on that and not on the land disposition itself? And the last question that I wondered is, why do they spark such interest in dominant media discourses in the country? So I'll get to the findings. So there are two main ideas or two main mechanisms that we can observe that are rooted in the colonial histories of the country. First of all, there's a mechanism of selective identity activation that rewards dissident movements' co-optation in state institutions. So, for example, about the Soulaliyet women's movement, all we know about them is that they are women and nothing else. However, we know, and this is not specific to Morocco only, land dispossession and privatization affects indigenous communities and black communities disproportionately, and it's also the case in Morocco. So why do we not see these identities portrayed in the media discourse? And this is because of mechanisms of misrepresentation and identity erasure. What's more interesting as an observation from my analysis is that in these historically dissident areas that are predominantly Amazigh indigenous Moroccan and or black, they have been historically dissident areas, which consequently did not really grab the attention of the media discourse, even the women among them, if we want to consider the Soulaliyet movement as a feminist movement. So finally, there are many, many other nuances to this analysis that integrate elements of identity and colonial history, and it's not as clear-cut as that, but for the sake of a short presentation, we will keep it at here. And what I'm interested in is redefining the contours of decolonial intersectionality in the Northern African context, where we do not really deconstruct identities in decolonial ways. And what is important is it's crucial to shed light on mechanisms of colonial and racialized erasure and their material consequences on marginalized communities. Thank you.